to Dr. Edwards. Thank you.
Okay, yes. So, yes, I hope you enjoyed the film too. And so let me officially welcome you to this Japanese Film Festival sidebar called When Japanese Film Found Its Voice, which, as you already know, covers films of the 1930s. And we opened with Goshu Heinosuke's Woman of the Mist on Thursday. Last night, the festival played Mizoguchi Kenji's The Story of the Last Chrysanthemums. After this talk, we'll have an opportunity to see an early film by Naruse Mikio, Three Sisters with Maiden Hearts. Tomorrow morning, we have the chance to sample a classic from Shimizu Hiroshi, The Masters and a Woman. And tomorrow afternoon is an early Ozu Yasujiro film, The Only Son. And the retrospective segment of the festival finishes up with Kinugasa Tainosuke's Original An Actor's Revenge from 1935, which of course is not to be confused with Ichikawa Kon's fabulous but much more frequently screened remake made in 1963. When the Japanese Film Festival invited me to talk today, they gave me an open brief, but I thought it made sense to focus on the film that we just saw and its director. Ozu, Mizoguchi, and to a lesser extent Naruse and Shimizu are all names that come easily to those drawn to Japanese film. But the director of today's film, Yamanaka Sadao, is not likely to be as familiar. Yet in the 1930s, Yamanaka was regarded as one of the brightest lights of the Japanese film industry. Yamanaka's career was a short one, and there's a logical reason for this, as Yamanaka died young in 1938. He was aged 28, almost 29. And on the day that his final film, Humanity in Paper Balloons, was released, 25th of August 1937, Yamanaka was drafted by the Japanese army to be posted to Manchukuo, what Westerners commonly call Manchuria, the puppet state that the colonialist Japanese Empire set up in China's northeast region. Yamanaka did not die in battle, but less glamorously died from dysentery. Pioneering film scholar of Japanese cinema, Noel Birch, has said that Yamanaka was sent to the war front in China as punishment for his political commitments, a possibility that I'll return to a bit later in the talk. Yamanaka's work straddled the era from silent to sound, and he started off, as many directors do, as a scriptwriter. During Japan's silent era, he was regarded as fast and talented, and while working across multiple studios. And like many fast and talented people, Yamanaka's star rose quickly. In addition to writing scenarios, he worked as an assistant director, and in a short time, at the age of 25, in 1932, he directed his first film for Kanjuro Productions called The Genta Coast, Sleeping with a Dagger. From that film to Humanity in Paper Balloons, his final film for PLC, which stands for Photochemical Laboratories, they were a precursor to Toho. From those films, Yamanaka directed 22 films in a 5-year time span. Technically it was 26, but as one of those additional films was part of a collective trilogy. In fact, the Jirokichi the Rat was part of that trilogy. And another film was released in 2 parts. So it's 26, 22, depending on how you want to do it. His official output is generally regarded as 22, but in contemporary terms, it all depends on whether you call Kill Bill 1 film or 2. Okay, now regardless of how you count them, all of Yamanaka's films were in the genre of a jidaigeki, which essentially means that they take place in the repressive late Tokugawa era, which in Western terms is the first half of the 19th century. In various modes, Yamanaka's films depict Japanese urban life of that era, the people of that time, the merchants, the women of the pleasure houses, the peasants, their self-described betters, and most notably, samurai. That said, there's not that much swordplay in Yamanaka's films, certainly not in comparison to, say, Kurosawa's work in the jidaigeki a generation later. So for example, in the film we just saw, there's essentially 3 contests, The first in the pleasure house is over almost before it starts. The second one is a complete burlesque. And the third final one is like a bonus for the audience to go out with, so they really feel like they've seen the jidaigeki. When the Great Kanto earthquake hit Tokyo in 1923, and devastated that city, the production of period films was transferred to Kyoto. Now, still today, Kyoto is a city that's a treasure trove of historical and traditional buildings and perfect for outdoor shooting, outdoor scenes. Of course, some sets were still used, but then less than if they'd stayed in Tokyo and stayed with the Tokyo studios. Thus, in the 1920s and the 1930s, the Japanese film industry was divided between Tokyo and Kyoto. And filmmakers like Yamanaka, who specialised in jidaigeki, all worked exclusively in Kyoto. That said, despite the various film studios' desire to present architectural accuracy, it was Yamanaka's desire, his ideal was to modernise the jidaigeki so that it was actually a contemporary drama with people with top knots. He wanted to do that rather than idealise the past. Directing 5 films in his first year, Yamanaka was a popular sensation. So when the slightly older Yasujiro, who had begun to find fame with his urban set contemporary films, found himself near Kyoto in late 1933, he decided to meet this young director. The two became firm friends, and this will come as no surprise to those of you who know much about Ozu. They also became solid drinking buddies. Now, if hearing that Yamanaka made 22 films has you thinking that there's an untapped vein of Japanese films to investigate, the bad news is that only 3 of Yamanaka's films survive. Since around half of his features were silents, this is a universally common fate, because across the world, many silents have not survived. Partially, this is due to the instability of the films being on nitrate stock. Also, it was universal because, with very few exceptions, the coming of sound meant that silence was suddenly held in low regard by both movie audiences and, more importantly, the production companies. Silence were considered unlikely to experience a revival of interest and therefore of little commercial value. So this led to the production companies neglecting their product and in some cases disposing of the product. Add to that the carpet bombing of Tokyo, where most film companies had their head offices, and the devastation, nuclear and otherwise, acted upon other Japanese cities, and the loss of most of Yamanaka's films is more understandable. 8 of Yamanaka's sound films have also been lost, but the 3 Yamanaka films that still fully exist are all sound films. The 3 titles are, and I'm going in reverse order, the aforementioned Humanity in Paper Balloons, his final film, the only one he made in Tokyo, made in 1937, Priest of Darkness, made in 1936, and today's film, Tange Sazen and the Pot Worth a Million Euro, made in 1935. Let me take this opportunity to confess that while I have some rudimentary Japanese language skills, some talents escape me, and the pronunciation of the word ro is one of them. Apologies to fluent and native speakers who unsurprisingly hate to hear a language they love being massacred, but such failings do give me sympathy for those Japanese who come to English-speaking countries and can't differentiate between R and L. Regardless, as I've already mentioned, all of Yamanaka's films were jidaigeki. But while they share the same genre, the surviving films are not all the same. So take a moment to think of Howard Hawks' westerns and think about the difference between Red River and Rio Bravo, and you might have an inkling of what I'm getting at. The genre is the same, but the tone differs considerably. Yamanaka's final film, Humanity in Paper Balloons, has a wistful, sad tone that has led some commentators to speculate that Yamanaka had anticipated the likelihood that he would not survive the war. And while I'm all for the auteur theory, I agree with the late Frida Freeberg, Melbourne's most astute, knowledgeable and sorely missed expert on Japanese cinema. She once wrote that such a conclusion does tend to overlook the contributions of the production's other personnel, and that Yamanaka had not written the script for the final film, and even more, it overlooks the idea that the story, like the other still existing Yamanaka film, Priest of Darkness, is based on a pre-existing kabuki play. Finally, Yamanaka